Thank you so much, Maria. This morning, we're virtually joined by our musical guest all the way out in sunny LA, Gabe Goodman.
Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Gabe.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
So, Gabe, I looked at your Twitter and I looked at your Spotify, and you describe your music as sensitive. So I want to ask you just a little bit about your sound and why you call it sensitive.
I feel like the sensitive title is really just, I think when people are singing kind of quietly and sad, and they have a guitar, especially if it's like an acoustic guitar, I feel like people sort of see that as like sensitive, or I feel like the word heartfelt is used a lot. There's a lot of these terms that I feel like that's signify to people that you're about to hear something that's maybe a little bit sad and sensitive. So that's kind of where that comes from. And also just, I think a lot of my songwriting does deal with like sort of heavy emotions, and trying to parse them out or dig into them. So that does, I guess that is sort of a type of sensitivity. But yeah, that's kind of where that comes from.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely when I was listening to your song, I definitely heard a lot of yourself in it.
Yeah, for sure. It's very emotional. And you've touched on it a little bit, but who or what inspires you to create music?
I feel like a lot of it is just people around me that, whether it's romantic or family or friends or stuff like that. A lot of that sort of inspires my songwriting, but also just I think a lot of other music, a lot of just thinking, a lot of I don't know, all sorts of different things too. I find there's not necessarily one thing, but I just try to be whether it's a conversation with a friend that strikes me in a particular way, or something very heavy happens to me and I feel like I need to find a way to process it or write about it or get an idea out that I can't really say to people. I feel like that's kind of that's the most inspiring thing to me, or where I feel like songwriting can be the most exciting, and like can really resonate, I think, with me, at least in terms of the process, is thinking about it in this way of like, I know that I couldn't really probably say this to a friend, and that I maybe don't have the words or I'm not ready to, but maybe if I can find a way to express it as a song, or with lyrics, I can communicate it finally. And not even because I want them to understand. I don't really find myself like writing songs for specific people and being like, this one's for you, babe. It's more like, it's more just I want to be able to see if I can communicate myself more clearly and more accurately. And that's inspiring to me. That idea of always sort of, I don't know, a lot of this sounds kind of like hippie did or something, like just this idea of like constant improvement or self-betterment through the ability to communicate in your songs. I think that's kind of what's inspiring to me, I feel like. And that takes many shapes in terms of like who things are about.
On that same vein, your new song, When I Say That I Love You, just came out this last Friday. So through that song, what are you trying to express? Like when you wrote that song, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so that's to me, that song is I was very literally just thinking a lot about, I started writing actually last year. I moved to Los Angeles in October to sort of escape. I was living in New York for a while, and I wanted to escape sort of New York COVID winter. So I moved out here, and when I had been visiting in Los Angeles for a little bit last fall, and I started to write. I just had a chorus idea, and I was thinking a lot about, everybody says I love you to someone ideally at some point in their life. But when you say it, everybody brings their own experiences and brings their own. It means something very different when every individual person says it. So when I say it, it might mean something very different than when you say it, or when a friend of mine says it, or when my mother says it, or whatever. Everybody brings their trauma or their positive experiences, or all these different things that they've experienced when they say that to someone. And so I was just trying to think to myself, what does it actually mean when I say it? If I'm being honest with myself, is it like, what does that really mean? And a lot of that, I think in this song is like this, is sort of this like, it can be really anxious, or it can be really desperate, or it can be all these sort of like less like sexy things, I guess. But trying to be honest with myself about that fact. And that was really what the idea was just how, if I'm believing this, it's a sort of universal thing that we all talk about, and there's all these songs written about, every song to some extent is about love. But trying to sort of dig a little bit deeper and like, well, what, like, just even for me, not trying to make it a universal thing necessarily, but just when I say it, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, that's
It's a very, very literal idea from the title. But yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting interpretation. Like, I'm gonna start thinking about that just
Yeah.
for myself.
Definitely
Really,
haven't thought
yeah,
about
was
that before, but I love it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
shifting a little bit, how has your music career been affected by the pandemic?
It's been honestly, in some ways, it's been really nice for it. I mean, I work a day job, and so a lot of my day-to-day life has, other than a few months that I was not doing that, I was furloughed. My day-to-day life has stayed pretty similar and has allowed me to sort of keep a lot of the structure I have around working during the day and then being in the studio at night and continuing to write. And it's, I really, for me, like working in the studio and recording is kind of my favorite thing to do. And so the ability to sort of not be needing to think of too much about shows, which I love doing too, but my like heart really lies in the studio. And so the ability to just be continuing to work as much as all my recordings and have a little more time to dedicate to that and less time going out and having a social life and maybe feeling joy has allowed me to go into the studio and continue to write and record, which has been awesome. But in terms of like career stuff, I mean, I decided to move out to Los Angeles. As I said, partially just because like weather, like overall quality of life question. As much as I love New York, but also in Los Angeles, I've been doing a lot of production work and work for other people and co-writing. That was something I started to do in New York, and sort of out here doing more things of that nature and trying to explore how that feels in different scenarios. Obviously, still very much under the guise of COVID, and a lot of like Zoom chats or like masked sessions is a very common, unfortunately, kind of weirdly thing now. Weirdly a common thing now. But that's I would say that it's overall it's a kind of a distant or weird thing to say. I've talked to friends about this, how obviously it's a horrible time for so many reasons, and I definitely have felt the impact on like many aspects of like mental health, things like that. However, I think for music and my ability to make it more, it's actually been nice. I've been able to enjoy that part of it a lot.
So you were talking about just like adjusting your music to COVID, and also like how you've been doing these masked sessions. How have you been promoting your music during like a time where you can't really go out and perform?
Yeah, I mean, it's really just it's like it's funny, like as you mentioned, I put out a song Friday, and I was just thinking about it's so cool to see people sharing it or listening to it. But release days or any sort of promotion is just it's very very localized to social media. It's like the only way that I know that any of this is happening and that my song is out is if I'm on Instagram or I'm on social media.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's as if my life is literally the same. So it does really feel like it shifts the focus really heavily into social media, which is I don't know. It's a mixed bag. I mean, I feel kind of I've done a few like this sort of a live stream show type things, and I'm probably going to continue doing more of those as I'm putting out more music this year and stuff. But I don't. It really becomes like artists are sort of being asked to, and myself among them, really become like social media content creators in a lot of different ways. Like whether it's learning how to use Twitch or learning how to use TikTok or do these other things that like are sort of standing in for going to a show and things like that. So I don't have a very sad TikTok at this point. I don't know exactly what to do with it, but like I've just really been using social media and trying to get the word out that way. But otherwise, it's kind of hard to promote anything.
Right. Well, we've been loving your newest song, and so we have to ask, do you have any new projects that you're working on or new songs coming out in the future?
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate that. I do. I'm working on a lot of music, and there's definitely a lot more coming this year. More songs in mind. Other stuff that I've been producing and working on that I'm excited about. But yeah, lots more music coming this year, which is very exciting.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Gabe.
Thanks, guys.
When we come back, Gabe Goodman is going to perform his latest song, When I Say That I Love You.
Stick around, you don't want to miss it.